just want to clarify one thing, this is not an official Timber Wolf Alliance presentation since we're not the Coyote Alliance. But as I've given talks about wolves throughout southern Wisconsin and northern Illinois and Iowa, a lot of questions come up about coyotes, and especially that we have coyotes now. So first of all, thank everybody for coming out in this cold, it's almost spring-like now. Contrary to popular myth, coyotes and wolves don't live in dens or rock caves or anything like that. So the weather we've had last week, the coyotes and the wolves are just out there, as it is, hunkered down in the cold. But they do both have 2 layers of fur, an under fur, and a heavy, that keeps them warm, and a heavy guard layer of hair on the outside that will shed the rain and snow. So they do pretty well. So then I'll give you a PowerPoint for about 40 minutes or so, 45 minutes, and then if you want to hold questions, they may get answered during the program. I'll be glad to take those afterwards. So we're based out of, Timber Wolf Alliance is based out of Northland College, which I just learned is about to close their doors up in Ashland. We're a program of Sigerlos Environmental Institute. And I don't have to talk about SIG anymore. You guys all know who he is, probably. It's relationships with the land. So what we started doing was we realized with wolves coming back into the state, give me with my new remote here. We did have wolves come back into the state on their own. Most people think they were, a lot of people think they were reintroduced. What happened was we had wolves originally in all of the United States, all the contiguous states, except for Hawaii, obviously. We had 5 species of wolves. We had the Rocky Mountain wolf, the Arctic wolf, Mexican wolf, the gray wolf, eastern timber wolf, as you much call it here. And we have a slightly different wolf here, the red wolf, which is different than all our other wolves. So what happened was, as European settlers started to go from east to west and settle the land, they discovered that the wolves are not our friends here, they're going to eat our livestock. And I try to tell people back then, a herd of cattle back then for farmer settlers might have been 2 cows, 1 cow. So to lose that one piece of livestock was a substantial loss. So it wasn't long before that we started a war with the wolves as we expanded westward as we moved in. And we put bounties on the wolves. The last bounty was lifted in the late 1950s. But by then we had gotten rid of all of the wolves in the lower 48 with the exception of northern Minnesota, what we now know as the Boundary Waters, that general area there. So we had basically wiped out all the wolves in the country at that point. So traditionally coyotes were in the southwest. We did have them throughout, but this was more or less their home area down here where the coyotes had their main body of where they grew up, survived. But as the wolves disappeared, there was an ecological niche that was missing. There was no top canine predator anymore. So the coyotes quickly filled in that role. And they started to then move from the southwest and expand north and eastward. Right now we have coyotes pretty much throughout all 48 of the lower states. And they've made it far up into Canada. One thing of interest, as the coyotes did move this way, we believe a lot of I should back up a little bit. Our wolves did finally start to come back on their own. We didn't reintroduce them. There was a failed attempt back in the 70s that didn't have any survivors, but all the wolves we now are descendants from wolves that came back from Minnesota and Canada. And they managed to come back here as their populations grow and the bounties was lifted, we had no hunting. They started moving to Wisconsin and upper Michigan. And they've totally filled that area now. So right now we have maybe 1,000 wolves, give or take 50 or so on average in northern Wisconsin. There's a segment in the Black River Falls area because the geologic area, the habitat is very much like an island of the north that's been planted down there. We also have elk in that area, but most of our wolves are from Wausau and north, and they've pretty much filled that area with their populations. Wolves and coyotes are also very intolerable of others similar to their species. So wolves do not like coyotes, coyotes do not like foxes. Again, they're competing for different food sources. So going forward to what I started to say, as wolves started to move this way, we believe they picked up genes from wolves as they've studied coyotes in the Northeast. And coyotes in the Northeast have gotten quite a bit bigger. And we think a lot of those coyotes have picked up wolf, and a lot of them have domestic dog genes in them. So the Southwest coyotes you think of in the coyote thing are a little bit smaller, thinner, more adapted to their environment, and they're eating smaller prey. So as they moved up into the northeast, they've got larger prey. The coyotes have gotten a little bit larger themselves. And you'll here see one of those larger coyotes. So coyote versus a wolf, there are significant differences between the two animals. They both have very long legs, but you'll see here the coyote's got those pointed ears and the wolf's got the rounded ears. Go through a couple of things here. For those who haven't seen these skulls over here, there's a red fox and a gray fox. And I can pass these around if you want to handle them really carefully. These are replicas. So those are very small. I'm not going to pass around the wolf because he's pretty fragile and that's an actual skull. And then this is the coyote that we have. So if you compare a coyote and a wolf skull, you'll see a lot of differences between the two, particularly size. The coyote's got a biting pressure of about 500 to 7 pounds per square inch, and a wolf is closer to 900 to 1,200 pounds per square inch. Wow. So you can see they're very similar teeth. They're part of the canine family, which consists of wolves, coyotes, foxes, and domestic dogs. So if you want to pass him around carefully. And that's the guy. They said the wolf was an actual wolf. He was, I believe, hit by an automobile in Minnesota. This one's probably been in my possession for 25 years. But you can see the large canine teeth.
Pardon me, may I ask you a question? You said that wolves had a higher pressure.
Yes.
But pressure is force over a unit area, so if they have a smaller area over, then they're going to have a higher pressure.
Correct, correct. So wolves' bones are meant for crushing.
So what you want to know is the force.
Yep,
okay.
yep. So wolves got to want to crush those large bones, get to the marrow, things like that. It's also taking prey much larger themselves. One of the major differences between wolves and coyotes is wolves survive by eating prey larger than themselves. So wolves will eat buffalo, moose, and white-tailed deer. They'll eat smaller prey as well. So they've got a much bigger mouth, larger biting force, and they're a much bigger animal. Our wolves typically weigh about 60, 90 pounds. They might go a little over 100 pounds. And they're about 3 feet tall at the shoulder. Very leggy animals. So a lot of people, when they first see a wolf, say, at first I thought it was a deer because of the size amount of legs they have on them. In our wolves, they could be gray, brownish, grizzled, multiple colors. They're born one color. They don't change colors throughout their life. That's what they're born with. But we can also have different shades of gray, some more brown and white in the far north up towards the Arctic. The coyote is much smaller. It's got pointed ears, a more narrow snout. The coyote's specialty is animals smaller than itself, with the exception of deer. It's usually eating smaller prey, which I'll talk about in a second. Much smaller, 25 to 40 pounds. So a coyote's the size of a German Shepherd, a small German Shepherd actually. So much smaller animals, but again, they're after smaller prey, so they don't need them quite as big. So a coyote's not going to be black and a coyote's not going to be white. So a lot of people have different visions of the coyote, roadrunner, coyote. Some people like coyotes and wolves are some kind of Balto or Disney animal. And others think they're the reincarnation of the devil themselves. Again, they're going to eat us out of home. A lot of animosity came from superstitions too, from Northern or Eastern Europeans as they came over here. They would often consider that the coyote was in cahoots with the devil. Part of that may go back, way back to the days of the plagues, when they would have dead bodies and they would throw them out in the fields, and they'd have scavengers, and they'd see wolves amongst scavengers, and being ignorant at the time that we would think that the wolves were coming to eat the souls of the dead. So we've taken those fear and hatred towards the wolves, and we've also passed them on to coyotes. But a lot of people have problems with coyotes too, because the coyotes don't have fear of humans that the wolves do. So here you can see our coyote. It's very wolf-like looking, but again, the pointed ears and the pointed snout are a giveaway. I have a hard time telling a coyote from a wolf at a great distance, but as you get close, you can see. And wolves are just much more bulky. The coyotes are fairly thin animals. So the coyotes and the wolves have both survived well in the tall grass prairies of the west. They'll eat a lot of the same prey, but a coyote at 25 to 40 pounds, no match for a deer or a buffalo or anything of that size. Additionally, the wolves do not like coyotes, so they will kill coyotes on sight or chase them away. Back in 1994, wolves were reintroduced to Yellowstone National Park, as many of you know. And I had a lot of discussions with the park managers, and they were curious about our recovery in Wisconsin. What do we do here that they can do in Yellowstone? And we emphasized education. But at the time, Yellowstone had the highest density of coyotes in the nation. And I should mention, coyotes are only in North America. They aren't in Europe or any other continent. We knew that the wolves were going to take their toll on the coyotes. But in the first year and a half to 2 years, they cut the coyote population in half. So a lot of these amazing visitors would come in and look at their binoculars, and they're seeing a wolf running through the field. Next thing you know, they're seeing a bunch of wolves killing a coyote and ripping it up. Pretty gruesome, but they didn't want the wolves and coyotes competing for food. So they quickly culled that coyote population down. So we do have wolves and coyotes cohabitating in the north woods and elsewhere. The coyotes have moved north. But the coyotes have to be very skittish. They have to be very careful and stay out of the wolves' territory, or they're not going to do well in a one-on-one match. Coyotes have done very well in the short grass prairie too that we have. These are pictures that we have typical here. This area is actually where I used to work over near Research Park off of Whitney Way. For those who are aware where the old Westgate Mall was. Areas between there and Mineral Point were Cuna. That's the area where I worked where we had a lot of coyotes. That's where actually pictures that you see are on the east side of Whitney Way right here, and that's that super town.
How long ago was it?
These pictures are probably about 10 years old. So that prairie's doing really well, and for those who aren't familiar, I'll talk about that on the show later on. Prairie's doing very well, but we do have coyotes in that area. And one of the reasons I started putting this presentation together was I had coworkers with flurries of emails going around saying, we've seen coyotes, they were out in the parking lot last night, can I go to my car, do I need an escort, what do I do? If we have coyotes here, there was a lot of fear in the research park when they first started seeing them in the daytime. So I quickly said, well, I normally get programs on wolves, but I think we need some coyote education here, and that's the start of how this presentation came about, was to alleviate some of those fears that people had of coyotes there. So coyotes are not an apex predator, they're a mid-level predator. They do have, again, other animals that will kill them. Grizzly bears if they get a chance, but it's really not worth the grizzlies' efforts and energies to go after coyotes since they'd be tough to catch. But wolves, as I said, they will chase coyotes away and get them out of their territory and kill them if they catch them. They're more of a mid-level predator. And they're not very selective on what they'll eat. One of the people have a lot of problem with coyotes. They say they're up near my house or up near, my farm. What are they doing? Well, one thing they're going to do at the farm is they're going to control your mice, and if you have any rat problems or anything like that around the grain bins, they're going to keep that cold. They do prefer rodents as their primary food source, but they love rabbits, and I'll go through a few pictures here. They will eat grasshoppers as well. Small rodents, chipmunks, mice are a specialty, but they're opportunists. They'll even eat apples, berries at times, snakes, feral cats are fair game for a coyote, unfortunately. So they're not fussy, they'll eat almost everything. The vast majority of their food is meat, not vegetables or anything. They will take advantage of things like berries and fruits when they're in season. So this is a picture about 100 feet off of my front door here. I live out near that school forest, as I mentioned. We are surrounded by coyotes, and I'm glad to have them. We've got packs all around us. I should have gone back to that map and showed you Wisconsin, but basically every county in Wisconsin has coyotes, and the southwest part of the state is prime habitat for coyotes. It would have been wolves as well, but the wolves are gone further up north. There's simply too much conflict as the wolves move south. They're into dairy country. They've never really come down that far. We have had occasional wolves pass through. We had one show up at Yellowstone Lake. We've had them go through Dodgeville in past years. Many years ago, when I started in the early 90s, a wolf was killed from Douglas County. We had a radio collar on it from the Bruce Company in Middleton. And we've had wolves killed over near Johnson Creek where those factory outlets are too. So wolves have traveled a great distance, but they haven't settled in the southern part. The coyotes have. A deer, especially young deer, are fair game for coyotes. That's one of the few animals of any size that they will take. Again, they aren't going to take any moose or elk or anything bigger than that. But you can hear and don't pay attention to these timestamps because these photos are out of sequence. This would be a vulnerable time for that fawn. On the back side of my house, about 120 feet behind it, 2 years ago, I do a lot of tracking for just a sport to see what's out there, particularly coyote and deer. And I was following a coyote track that merged with another coyote track on my property, and the two went along. And then they merged with a small deer track, which I found. And I followed those two tracks, and lo and behold, not far from my house, I never knew it occurred the night before they had taken a fawn, probably 120 feet from my house. Yeah, it was a little bit surprised that it was that close. I'm like, why didn't we hear it or anything? And I could tell by the tracks it had been taking a nap or something, and it was the middle of the winter, so it was an 8, 9-year-old fawn, or a month-old fawn. But they had taken it. Interestingly enough, 2 days later, there wasn't a sign of that deer. It was gone and scattered. And you couldn't tell anything had happened. They'd taken every little piece of it, every bone, everything was gone, scattered to the wind, if you will. But those same paths that are used by this deer are also used by the coyote. So I haven't seen any of those interactions, but we know they're there. And our property is surrounded by a lot of prairies. So fair game for coyote, and that'd be one of their favorites, young turkey. They do a number on our turkey every year. I see a lot of them in the fall. Every month I go by and see less and less. Right now I'm not seeing any young turkeys, just big toms. So that is fair game, and this is in my driveway. It's a quarter-mile driveway, so it's a little distance from my house right here. Raccoons are another prime prey, particularly young ones. So they'll be out there. Raccoons are active during the day sometimes, and particularly at night. Coyotes are active during the day and the night. We think of them as a night creature, much like the wolf, because that's simply when there's less humans out. So again, as I mentioned before, wolves are deathly afraid of humans. They understand that we're out to kill them. They don't want anything to do with us. They're in the north woods. They're far away from farms in general. Coyotes don't have that strong fear of humans, which sometimes creates conflict. Here's a domestic cat from our neighbor a quarter mile up the road. That cat's been around my trail cams for 4 years, and it's made it right through that coyote country. I don't know what it's doing. It should be prime game, but it's never been attacked by a coyote in the 4 years I've seen. And there's a hearty meal for a coyote too, is our woodchuck. We have one of those woodchucks living underneath our pool, actually, in the decking. He hasn't caused any problems, so we let him be. He's not in our garden or anything like that. But again, this is the type of prey that a coyote's going to go after. And of course, rabbits, that'd be another one. We have farmer neighbors that did get rid of our coyote packs one time about 10 years ago. They killed all the coyotes in the pack. And one thing I tell people, if you want to attract coyotes to your property, the best way to do it is to kill all the coyotes on your property. Because the other coyotes will sense that void, they will come in, they will take it over. So something to think about is if a coyote's on your property or nearby, think of what is it doing? Is it causing any problems? If it's not, you may just want to leave that be, because you don't know if you're going to get coyotes that'll come in. Once they kill those coyotes those particular years, we have a rabbit invasion the next 2 years. And they did a number on our shrubs and things like that. And it took about 3 or 4 years for the coyotes to repopulate the area. So management of coyote, I'll talk about it a little bit later, but that's the rabbits that we have. And you'll see the coyotes will come out using the same path. Here's a handsome, nice coyote that we have here in our driveway. They're going to be scent oriented. That's how they're going to find the animal. They've got keen eyesight and keen ears. But they're going to be scent driven, and that's how they're going to track their prey. But not all prey is going to be easy to take. So we've got a buck, and even if this buck didn't have a set of antlers on him, he's going to be simply too large for the coyotes to try to take down. Again, he's larger than them. That's what some of the wolves will go after, possibly, but not a coyote. So to get hit by one of these is going to be a big problem. And if you're a coyote or a wolf, you get hit you get a broken jaw, a broken leg, it's almost a death sentence to you. So you're not going to do well. One reason the coyotes are going to stay away. And then even so, more so than the antlers, the defense is those feet. So deer get a kick from behind, something chasing them, and I don't think I need to pass around. Most people have probably seen what a deer antler and a hoof look like. But that's a formidable weapon when it's kicked in a 3-foot direction. It's got quite a bit of a swing. But usually, again, if it doesn't kill the coyote, all it uses to break its jaw or break its leg, and the coyote's going to be doomed. So it's not an easy thing for coyotes to take large deer, so they'll pretty much avoid it. But they will take the younger ones. And they will hunt in the wintertime, like we have now. It's prime hunting. They can track, and the scents are clearer for them too. There's less vegetation disguising any scent. So they do quite well in the winter. The wolves just love the winter time. That's their time. They love it. Deep snow, especially up north, the deer get stuck with their thin antlers, or excuse me, their thin legs. They get stuck in that deep snow, bogged down. Wolves have a very large footprint, and they're going to act more like snowshoes. So they have a very good ability to chase them. So again, they thrive in the wintertime. And I'll leave these out here afterwards for those who haven't seen it. But just you can see a wolf track is how large it is compared to dog, and dogs come in all sizes. And then the coyote's much smaller. So it differs. One thing in tracking, people wonder, like, how do I tell if it's a wolf or a coyote? I won't get into it. There are many ways to tell, but the easiest way, one, is to look, are there any human footprints? You know, if it's a dog or anything. We've gone up north and done a lot of tracking. People have tracked up there in our group, helping the DNR. And sometimes they'll come across tracks. They'll follow them on a back road and they'll disappear and they'll just go. Well, they'll realize the tire tracks were there, and that's somebody exercising their dog running around. So look for a human sign, you know, as to dogs that might be dog. And the other thing is that wolves and coyotes are there for business. They use as little energy to get as much food as they can. That's their life mission, besides reproducing. So they're going to be tracking in a straight line more often. Dogs, and I've had beagles for years, dogs are just kind of all over the place, wandering around. And so that's another sign that you may have a dog versus a coyote. I suggest going to YouTube. There's some good, if you just search there, the difference between coyote and dogs. But it's tricky, even for those who know it, are biologists, myself. Sometimes, depending on the species of dog, to tell it from a wolf and a coyote track is a little tricky. And a lot of it is it alone, too. An example would be a wolf or a coyote. If you've got a lone animal, you know, it may well be a dog, but if you've got a couple or 2 or 3 traveling together, And you can learn after tracking on your own for a while, and you'll say, oh, this appears to be, a wildlife track, not a domestic dog. So again, that's our wolf in our driveway, or our coyote in our driveway. You can see the pointed ears, pointed snout. Similar color of a wolf might have, and long legs just much smaller. So the coyotes itself, people wonder a lot about a pack versus a coyote family versus a wolf family. The coyotes have a very similar social structure to a pack of wolves, but since they hunt prey that's smaller, that social structure is a little bit looser, a little weaker. If wolves are going to go out and kill an animal 5 times its size with their teeth, they need help doing that. A wolf is not going to take down an elk by itself, or even 2, so it might be 4, 5, 6, however many more. Our wolf packs are fairly small in Wisconsin, probably 4 to 5 animals. A coyote has a similar pack or structure, a family structure, but it's a little looser. And when you think about their prey, if a coyote's hunting and gets a mouse, well, I'm not going to split it 3 ways with my buddies, and they're just going to be fighting every time. So they're a little bit more loose than a wolf pack, not as structured, not as together all the time. It'll typically consist of pack of family, or a pack is the same thing with coyotes, is a male and a female. They be the litter. They often have a juvenile from the year remaining before that'll stay with them, and then the pups that are born every year. Right now in January, February, we're in the middle of breeding season for both coyotes and wolves. So similar to dogs, 63-day gestation period, they'll have their pups. They'll have dens, and the dens vary greatly. I haven't found the dens out on my property or next to mine yet, and I'll see if the search is very secretive. But they will occupy that den. The female of both wolves and coyotes are the only ones allowed in there, the babies. Nobody else is allowed in the den. And the babies, the pups will be born. In coyotes, it happens to be probably 4 to 7 pups to a litter. They'll be born deaf and blind. They open their eyes and their ears after 2 and 3 weeks. And then in the meantime, the male and whoever else is remaining in that pack will bring food back to the female. She's lactating and feeding those pups. But it's up to her to get a female wolf or a female coyote, the same thing, to get those pups out of that den and active and following the pack. Because if you think about it, they've been there week after week. Each day that pack has got to go out further and further to find food, because they're eating what's closest to the home. So she's got to get them out and mobile as soon as she can. So after a couple of months, they do start to come out, and they'll join the rest of the pack. Both of them will often be at home with either the female while the pack hunts, or maybe with a subordinate juvenile from the year before who will watch over like a babysitter. They call these rendezvous sites, and that's where they'll basically not be in the den, but they'll be in the area of safety, and the rest of the pack goes out and hunt, brings back their food. And howling is how they communicate. So another way of communicating is they will urinate and defecate around the edge of their territories. A wolf will have a 50 to 100 square mile territory. It's hunting large game. It needs a lot of food, a lot of pounds of meat. Coyotes are more like 5 to 10 miles square on their territory, so quite a bit smaller.
Is that for the pack or for what?
That would be for the pack or one, but again, it's a pack as a family, it's a small group. And the coyote packs are fairly small, but they'll often be many. Our particular house, I probably got 3 packs I can hear in different directions up from my house.
We
I
had
don't
these
recommend it if I-
screams. We had these screams at night. Are those coyotes?
Screams at night?
Yeah, really loud screams.
Yeah, a scream, if you go look at a fox, it's got a mating season call, and it's like, it's hard to describe. It sounds alien. It's not a howl, it's more like an extended bark. The coyote will howl similar to wolves, and they howl for different reasons. It's to communicate with other pack members. It's to tell another packs, this is our turf, stay away. So it's a warning call, and it's also a call to each other. Here I am, where are you? Let's go hunting. I made a kill. I tell my students, when I talk to young kids sometimes, it's like these score a touchdown and everybody starts applauding, sometimes the wolves will do the same thing. You know, if their killer start yipping and yapping.
We've heard a phenomenon repeatedly, where suddenly in the evening, when it's dark, multiple voices in kind of a yipping, chattering thing. It's really loud, and then all of a sudden, it's like somebody flipped a switch and silence.
Yep, that's coyotes.
And we've always wondered, what is going on? Is that like a greeting thing? Is it how do you think
That
they're
could
doing?
be, we're getting together and now we're together and now we stop. When I first went out howling with our wolf biologists, we knew where the wolves were. I don't recommend howling on your own. We were with them, but they do howling surveys to tell they were.
Yeah.
And the first time I got about 6 pups, wolf pups, to howl back at me from maybe a quarter mile, which is fascinating. A mile and a half, 2 miles off in the distance, all of a sudden you hear, ooh, and like it's light switch.
Yeah.
It was like the adult said, those are humans you're howling back at, guys. Oh, shut up. But coyotes can have like 11 vocalizations to them. Very complicated, more than a wolf. We don't fully understand what they are. I went out just a week or so ago because I love tracking around us to find out where those 6 coyotes were and follow their tracks because I knew exactly where from their house and how far they were away. And sure enough, I come out and I find 3 coyote tracks. It sounded like 6. So they have multiple calls and multiple howls of different types. But yeah, very often they'll howl to communicate to each other, to get together. And I hear the same phenomenon all the time. It often starts with a bark, similar to a dog bark. And then it develops into a howl and a series of howls. And then there'll be maybe other ones in the packs. And then they do shut off like a light switch.
We've also heard it sounds like a lone animal out there that just does repeated bark. And it's like it's trying to locate,
Yes.
or be found or something like that. They're trying to say, here I am, where's everyone else? And it's a regular pattern.
Yep, and that's what it is. It's saying, here I am, where you guys, it does that bark thing and then the howl. And I've heard that same thing at my house, and I've heard another one do it from the other way. And then sure enough, 15 minutes later, you hear a group howl. Yeah, but when you hear that lone coyote with that bark one, he's often trying to communicate and ask his buddies where they are. So that is our major way besides urinating and defecating and scenting their territory, is they howl and let each other know where they are. So how do we live with coyotes, and what's a good way? How do we survive together? We can coexist. Some people have a great fear of coyotes, same thing with wolves. One thing I wonder, if you do see a coyote, first thing might be fear, but maybe the next thing might be wonder. And you say, what is that coyote doing? And you'll find yourself looking at it from a different aspect that way. Instead of all of a sudden, oh, it's a big coyote, that's a terrible thing. They're a natural member of the prairie community, and they belong there. And I'll talk a little bit about that, but they'll control a lot of that rodent population and everything. Those smaller animals, they're not really competing. They do well. This is the area I mentioned before. So there's Odana Road, and here's where that big bus transfer point is. West Town Mall's here. But we have coyotes. We had coyotes all through this area here. And that's on the east side of there too. So that's the area from the office where I use that Charmony Drive looking west towards West Town. This is a large restored prairie around Research Park. So it's got a healthy population of coyotes. I've seen them actually outside our windows leaning up against the building when it's occupied, sunning on a winter cold day. Corner of the building where there's nobody there. I've also observed them out in the fields just lying there. So what do you do in Research Park when we have coyotes around? This is a common area that people park their dogs and go dog walking, and that's where a lot of the concern I mentioned came from before. This is another view. CUNA building is straight ahead of you to the right. That's looking up there, and this is where we have a lot of coyote sightings right in this area. Now, other people in there, some have had fear, but on the other side, there's an architectural firm that I knew folks with, and they've had coyotes in their back property right off of their office building. So this is right off of Whitney Way there, just north of the old, where it's now Hy-Vee, where it used to be Westgate. They would watch a pack of coyotes being born every year. And I can't imagine a more distractive way of working than seeing coyotes playing around in the backyard if you're trying to work. But they took a lot of nice pictures of these pups here. If we hadn't had any problems with these pups, they've grown up, they've probably died of old age by now. It's a tough life, they don't live long, probably 4 to 6 years. One difference between wolves and coyotes, and one of the reasons they've spread so quickly, is coyotes are able to mate in their first year of life. So they're very prolific, even though there's about a little over 50% mortality rate with coyotes, largely due to humans, hunting, and some car collisions.
Primarily, you say mate the first year, you're talking about both the males and the females.
And both the male and female. So they could be born in the early spring of one year, and by the end of that next year, they can be mating again. Where a wolf's going to take 2 years. So there's a lot of coyotes that can repopulate an area quickly. And again, cute pups that we have. So people were worried about the big bad coyote coming to get them as they were walking their dogs or anything in that research park area. And that's a coyote that's he's in the middle of a bark right there that we mentioned. So that's him in a barking phase. And it looks aggressive as heck, but he's trying to look aggressive. Both coyotes and wolves, even though they're willing to, they don't really want to fight if they don't have to. They much more vocalize, they prefer to scare the competing packs away from each other, fight if they must. Interesting, wolves, that's a major cause of mortality besides humans, is they call it intraspecific strike. It's wolf on wolf killing each other. And they're fighting over territory and hunting ground. Maybe not that different than humans.
And women, the females?
Females too, yes. Yep, they'll do the whole
But
thing.
it's legal to shoot coyotes anytime, isn't it?
It is. Yep, and I'll talk about that in a second, yeah. Okay. So bringing your wolves out, or bringing dogs out to the park, it's not a problem if it's a good-sized dog, you keep an eye on itself. So that's not the dog you want to be leaving walking around the coyote. Coyotes do have a bad reputation, sometimes deserve of actually taking, and we've seen the YouTubes of taking young dogs, small dogs, right out of people's backyards, patios, things like that. It does happen. You take a larger dog in there, you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
And the best thing is, especially with children and small dogs, keep them on a leash if you're not familiar with keep your children, if you're in the coyote country, close to you. They're not going to attack humans. Every year there's some coyotes that do bite children. When you look into the facts, you'll find out, as we did in California, where there was a kid bitten by a coyote pretty badly. The family had been sitting in lawn chairs every night in the backyard throwing hot dogs out of their box of hot dogs and feeding the coyotes, and they got used to it, and the kid got too close. So coyotes are not very much a threat to humans, but they can be, just keep an eye on them, be safe, and do your diligence. You mentioned hunting. We do have about 17 to 20,000 coyotes in the state now. They're everywhere, and the is year-round trapping and hunting on them. It's pretty much unregulated. They're considered a nuisance animal. But again, if you want to bring coyotes to kill every one of those. How do you manage conflict? Secure your garbage. They will eat garbage. They will go into mulch and go after that fruit. Secure the mulch. Very importantly, get rid of water and food sources if you can. Particularly people who leave food at night for raccoons, whatever it may be. You're going to attract coyotes as well. You don't want them near your house. We've lived in harmony with coyotes all these years. We've had dogs for 30 years, beagles near our house. They haven't bothered us because we keep an eye on them at night when we do let them out. Particularly cats. A lot of people let their cat out at night. Not a good idea if you're in coyote country. Fencing is recommended, 6 foot high by 1 foot deep. They are good diggers because they dig the dens. I didn't mention the dens, but the dens are often stolen from another animal like a woodchuck or something, and they'll just excavate it and reuse it. But they're capable of digging, so if they put fencing in, it's foot deep, they won't get underneath that. We have neighbors that raise sheep, and I just asked him a few days ago if he had any problems with coyotes. He has a fence that's only this tall. He used to electrify it. He hasn't in years because he hasn't had any problem with the sheep. The lambs, he brings them in during lambing season when they're small. And he brings them in at night, and he has a light out in the yard, which helps. He's got the same coyotes that we do, and they just haven't simply, in 30 years, he's never had any problem with them. So again, if you don't have any problem with coyotes, you might want to just leave those coyotes be. Lights may help. They're going to have limited effectiveness at times because the coyotes are going to get used to them. They see that same garage light all the night. Some people put motion lights in. When they gave a program on wolves quite a few years ago, there's a gentleman from Australia that invented what they call a fox light. And the theory behind this, it worked well for dingoes and foxes in Europe, but I don't know how well it's worked on coyotes, is you place a couple of these solar-powered lights, maybe a quarter mile apart from each other on your property, and they go off at random with different colors. So the first thing you're going to do is have alien spacecraft reports from your neighbors. It's pretty obtrusive, and this would be a last-ditch effort. I don't know how it works. It's about $140. I don't know if it's going to be worth it for each one. But it's supposed to simulate the effects of flashlights going off in the woods at random from hunters and scares predators away. But lights in the yard are definitely going to be helpful, and motion detectors lights would be good. Secure them at night, like I said, our neighbor does, especially during the lambing and birthing season. Get rid of anything, if you're a livestock owner, raising things like that, the placenta, anything like that afterwards, don't just toss it out in the field, and they're going to get a taste of that animal, and it's going to be an attractant. So properly get rid of that, bury it, dispose of it as you would. If you do have a problem, act, same thing with a wolf, even though highly unlikely. Act large, act big, like you would with a bear. Put your hands out, spread yourself out, yell aggressively. Don't be afraid to throw something like a rock or something at it. Usually it's curiosity when a coyote's looking at you, and often it's because you have a dog next to you. And that coyote doesn't know if that dog is a competitor or not, or maybe a possible mate, you know. Because again, they will crossbreed. It's not their first choice, but it does happen. But often if it has a dog there. Don't haze a coyote with pups. What I just said to do, if it's got pups, just leave the area, back away. Don't try to haze it because you might have a negative interaction with that coyote if you see pups near it. So just leave away, back away, go away, find another route. And if you need to report to wildlife agencies, they can take care of things. So lethal means may be necessary. Because unfortunately coyotes will learn, and if they get a habit of, here's where the free chickens are, they may come back over and over, and you might not have any choice. But again, be careful, because if you take out every coyote you happen to see, you may be taking out what's keeping the bad coyotes away. We had a rancher up north with northwest Wisconsin. She had wolves surrounded her dairy farm and never had a problem for years and years. And that first year that they had a wolf hunt, they took out the wolf pack next door. The next wolf pack hadn't had that relationship with her, and they immediately started having problems. So she's like, these wolves are around me, but they haven't caused a problem. I'll live in harmony with them. I'm not causing any problem. But as soon as we were gone, they got a new, more aggressive pack, and they had problems after that. So again, that's a last-ditch effort that you'd have to do, is anything lethal. And it's a part of web of life. So again, as I said, when you see coyotes, maybe you won't look at it with so much fear, but more of admiration and interest. They're extremely interesting animal. And they're somewhat of an umbrella species. They're not a keystone species, neither is a wolf. Our northern eco-forest system worked pretty much as it did, but the numbers were skewed, how many deer we had and other things there. But the same thing with coyote. We can have a prairie without a coyote, but having a coyote completes that prairie. Now you've got that high-level predator in the prairie. You've got the whole game of things. Without a coyote in the prairie, you're always missing something. There's always something quite lacking. Not sure what it is. That may be what it is. thought from Aldo Leopold before we leave. So, we've got to learn that predators are part of the ecosystem. We see CWD, last thing I'll mention that a little bit about coyotes. We don't have CWD as much in the north. People are trying to study that as the wolves. They're opportunists, again, they're going to use as little energy as they can to get as much calories and food as they can. And if you got a CWD deer, it's going to be a lot easier to take down than it will be a healthy deer. So they may be controlling that population. Will coyotes affect it? We don't know. There's so many deer, and they don't go after those larger deer. We don't know how that's going to work out, but studies are starting on the wolves. So it's a good question. Are they going to do anything with the CWD as far as controlling it? Because we're right in the heart of that.
Do coyotes hunt cooperatively, similarly to wolves, or?
Yes.
They do?
Yeah, they do hunt cooperatively. Most of their, when they're hunting small animals, it's usually on their own when they're hunting rabbits. But when they get in the larger areas, they will hunt. And they often, what I found is they hunt in pairs, or maybe a third animal. Not large groups like a wolf. You might have, the entire pack, 6, 8, 10 wolves all right together. The coyotes are going to be more spread out. And again, it depends what they're after. Because again, if you get a rabbit, you might split it 2 ways, but you're not going to be able to split that 4 ways amongst your pet members without a lot of fighting. And a lot of deer that they do get are just by chance. Same thing with black bear. Black bear had a tremendous good sense of smell. So they'll take out the fawns pretty much some way across them, and they're not hunting them as much as they happen to just come across them. So I'd be glad to take any questions that we have.
I'm wondering about the relationship with the increasing number of deer around here with the coyotes, what that might do. When we first moved here many, many years ago, there were a lot of deer, and then CWD happened and more hunting. And now there's not so much, and the numbers of deer are going way up in our neighborhood. And I wonder, will that lead to more coyotes in the neighborhood because there are more fawns to prey on, or is there any
Probably not,
relationship?
because your coyote population is probably going to be what the land could support, and they've got back-to-back packs and territories all. So here's one territory, the other one's next to it, here's another territory. So they aren't going to expand that much, or
Won't
packs
matter
aren't
the
gonna get
numbers
much
of
bigger.
deer.
Right.
It won't control my deer.
Yeah, probably not, that's right. And that's the thing is, we've gotten rid of those top predators that would have controlled it. If we had the wolves back, cougar, bobcat, or particularly take a lot of deer, especially up in the north. They're a prime killer of deer in the north.
This question is from a friend who keeps sheep, and she says she's got coyotes and she's happy to coexist with them, but last summer, out of a flock of 70 lambs, the coyotes got 20, and that's beyond what she can tolerate.
Yeah, so she's got to do something. I would have her call animal control, and she's going to have to do something with that much of it. Was it all at one time?
Yeah, I think there were someone doing chores, didn't close the gate, other things, but when she came home, every paddock had 3 or 4 dead animals in it.
Yeah, that's a shame, yeah. Yeah, and unfortunately, you've got coyotes that have learned that that's where it is. So she's put proper fencing up, which is important.
Yeah,
Keep those fencing closed
yeah, she
and
heard
then bring them in.
that one break in the sheep wire fence is enough for a coyote to get through.
Yeah, possibly, but it's not for, well, where she live roughly? Township?
Off K in,
Okay. Yes.
Iowa County.
Yep, I know Highway K, yeah, so she's right in there. Yeah, I would have her call animal control at that point. Yeah, both coyotes and wolves occasionally go on a surplus kill, they call it. Wolves have been blamed on that, where they've gone through and killed 20, 30 cattle in one night in a herd out west of the
More
mountains.
than they need.
Yeah, and it's just their instinct goes in, and it's more than they need, and it's an instinctive thing. It's like, kill it and we'll eat it later, kill it and we'll eat it later. They just kind of, almost like imagine humans going into a riot, they just kind of lose their mind and
She
do that.
should do something, and someone else volunteered. They heard that if you shoot one member of the pack, that all the females, that loss of a member makes the pack go into heat.
No.
That's
No.
a urban myth, that's a
Correct.
rural myth.
Yep. Typically only be one female in that pack. The heat or the alpha female that goes into heat. Occasionally there's a second time.
Is the loss of a pack member enough to cause a female to go into heat? What are the circumstances that would trigger it?
If it's a female alpha, yes, then the next one will come in. The beta will step up probably
And
and
it will
become the
come
new.
into heat if the
and
female
come into
alpha is shot.
Right, but they're only going to come into heat in January and February, so if a female gets shot in July,
It won't.
there won't be any changes in activity in that pack till it's breeding season. They only breed once a year.
Okay.
Guard animals can be pretty effective, though. We have a neighbor that just kept
Yeah,
a
she
donkey.
had
Yeah, Great
She had
Pyrenees
donkey,
are
it
great
wasn't
animals,
donkey.
and surprisingly donkeys work very well.
She had the loss even though she had a donkey.
Pardon?
She
It was a
had the
donkey.
loss even though she had a donkey.
Yeah.
kind of scattered, dispersed flock. I
So
guess.
donkeys act as a good guard?
Pardon?
Donkeys act as a guard?
Yes, donkeys have been proven fairly good at effective
Yeah.
at being a guard dog, for wolves even.
Yeah.
Great Pyrenees, some of the big guard dogs.
My neighbors had a lot.
Well, we have donkeys and we have no wolves. There's your proof.
Yeah, they're hiring now range riders out in Montana and stuff to be with those cattle. Because cattle out in the mountains,
What did you say about Montana?
range riders, so in Colorado, they've reintroduced wolves in Colorado. And they're hiring range riders, which they used to have back in the old days of the cowboys. That would be the 2 or 3 guys that work with the cattle. They're out there for 4 months all summer long, barely going to town. They're with the animals protecting them. That's something we got away with because we didn't have the predators. And now that the predators are back, they're going back to that old management style of, well, if we put people out there with them, and again, often with a couple guard dogs, a couple Pyrenees.
What's the status of the wolf population in Wisconsin? I know I've read some talk about trying to.
Yeah, I can give you a 3-hour program on wolves in Wisconsin, but right now we have about 980, I think. They haven't done a winter count. We do a winter count by doing track surveys. We get a good estimate of the population. It seems like it's now finally stabilized. When I started doing wolf education, we had 27 wolves in the state. And back then, in the early 90s, we said, won't it be interesting someday if we discuss if we need to have a hunt or not? You know, not that we can't.
If I could make a comment
Yeah.
on, like you read about, people that say a farm, they'll say, well, geese are eating some of our corn.
Yep.
We grow hundreds of billions of bushels of corn, so I'm
Yep.
thinking, the amount they eat is pretty small. Or if a wolf kills a deer, we
Yep.
have a million deer, so. But people seem to capitalize on saying, well, this is a real threat to our economy, and I'm not sure that's true.
Yeah, we were a little surprised when they did delist the wolves, they immediately enacted a hunt by the Congress. It wasn't the DNR that did that, it was the Legislative Bureau that put that into a rule, taking it out of the DNR hands, which was a mistake in my opinion. Leave it to the landowners, they mandated the hunt. There's been debate on how many wolves we should have in the state. Make a long story short, the original plan, and I know the authors, they're friends of mine who wrote that plan, we didn't know at 27 wolves, or 35, 40 when the plan was written, how many wolves we had in the state, how many to support. So they said our management goal was 300, to which I said you need to clarify that writing, because in 20 years, somebody's going to say that's a cap, not a goal. What does a goal mean? And that's where some people misconstrued it. It was never meant to be a cap. But are those, particularly cattlemen's and the Bear Hunters Association, trying to drive that number back in that 350 range. So there is legislation now that's starting to go back through the state. As soon as they delist the wolves again, they've been relisted and delisted half a dozen times. Trump is most likely going to delist them. Then the hunt will go back into effect, so we may have a hunt in the not too distant future.
When you say there's legislation now, what is that?
There's legislation moving through to delist the wolf again,
State or fed?
fed, which will probably happen. Unless something stays on the legislative end changes, which I don't think in our current politics in Wisconsin is going to change. There will be a hunt. When they did a hunt last time, originally when they first wanted that hunt, they wanted hunting at night. They wanted hunting from roads for wolves, hunting with dogs, which they got. Dog hunting, well, it's a whole subject, I'll get it going. If they don't reach it by the end of deer season, that management goal, then they will allow dog hunting to continue. So when they did have that one season, people were out there with dogs, they were out there with snowmobiles, it was a brutal slaughter. There was no sport to it at all, to chase an animal down with a snowmobile or a pack of dogs. They're allowed to rotate the dogs out and get a new fresh group into there. And when they first, and I had to testify when they first did that hunt, they said, you guys really want to have hunting at night with dogs. So here I am with a wolf, and I've got 6 dogs, a flashlight, and a gun. And that wolf's not stupid. He's got to go back to his pack, and he's got to lead those dogs back to his pack, whereas his friends are going to help him out. Now I've got a dog on a wolf fighting, and I've got a guy with a flashlight and a gun. Somebody's going to die. They were able to drop that and a couple of the other provisions. But you may see a wolf hunt again. But the population, to your question, has stabilized at around 900 to 1,000. And there's 2 populations. There's a biological population goal, which how many the ecosystem can survive. And then there's a human population goal, how many are we going to survive or tolerate. And what we saw was once they hit around 600, 700, that's when a lot of people in the north said, that's enough. I'm seeing a lot of them. We've got plenty here now. And they were able to tolerate them when we got a few hundred, but when you get past that 600, 700, they're all calling for management. And one of the things we look for management too, there were certain areas in Nicolay and Shawamigan where there's no farm, there's no livestock. Keep some of those core areas, there's no reason for hunting them there. Well, but they basically just opened up the whole state for it.
Can you talk about how you actually census those numbers and what type of methods biologists are using to get those population counts for coyotes and for wolves?
Coyotes are much looser. Wolves, I can speak in more detail. We used to have hearings every spring and I would attend them with our Wolf Alliance in our group. We had volunteer trackers that worked with DNR, and they each got blocks of land that they would survey multiple times a day. And they drive down the country roads, they look for wolf sign, how many wolves they do. They do it over a period of winter, and they got a pretty good accurate count of how many wolves, where they were, and what part of what county. It's become, and I don't know exactly what they're using, they haven't had a count in 2 years, I think now. They used that to analyze how many we had. It was really accurate, but it gets more theoretical once you get past that 600, 700, because you can't do those track series for that many animals and be accurate. So it's a lot of it's extrapolation.
Coyotes versus foxes. And both occupy similar territories, inverse relation, I'm assuming, between...
Yeah, similar to wolves and coyotes. Coyotes don't like foxes, because foxes are eating those same grasshoppers, those same mice and everything, and coyotes will chase the fox away. So there's a lot of animosity.
We had a raccoon come to our door last March, I think it was, with canine and distemper, which apparently is always in the population of raccoons. What I'm wondering is, since we had, it died somewhere in our woods, I tracked it as well as I could. I couldn't find the tracks because it was so melting. Is that carcass, is canine distemper a big problem? Will it transfer to coyotes?
A raccoon.
They get distemper from the raccoon.
No, not that I'm aware. Coyotes and canines can get distemper. It does happen. Yeah, I'm not aware of that happening unless they kill it right away. That's a good question.
But yeah, would they just?
I'm not aware of it, but that is a good question.
Yeah.
Because people up north are really so concerned about wolves, because as you said, when the population goes way, way up, they are really concerned, especially farmers and other people. They're just not willing to live with, I think, as many as we have now. What would be your recommendation? What is the best way to handle that? I mean, either a hunt or not a hunt, or how would you do that to bring the population down so that people could live with that without going over and, as you say, just killing them all as they did during the one hunt or taking a lot more than they should? What would be your recommendation?
Okay, going to my personal, non-official opinion on that. One is that when they did delist wolves at one point, they put them in from endangered to threatened. At that point, the DNR, and I know the folks who do this, were able to give permits out to landowners that said, apply for a permit if you've got wolf depredation on your property. It will allow you to dispose or kill that, dispatch that wolf on that property. When they issued those permits, they weren't that anymore issued. The grumbling stopped immediately. Not because people were then killing wolves on the property, but they were empowered. And they felt enabled, and they knew that, hey, if I hear something going on in the chicken coop, I can go out with a gun now and not have the DNR arrest me. Even though they never fired a gun, it stopped a lot of that grousing and grumbling. So a lot of it's control of who's going to tell me what to do here. In Europe, when you want to when you want to hunt big game in Europe, you hire a guide. And I've often said on deaf ears, boy, wouldn't that be a good job creator if anybody who wants to have a hunt on a wolf can go out with a trained guide, pay good money for that guy to take them out. And that guide hopefully would be trained to know enough about wolves so he can say, that's the alpha male and female, don't take that one out. I know this pack, there's a 2-year-old, okay, you might be able to shoot that one. A little bit more controlled hunt. And again, too, following that, if they had, and it's probably easier said than done, if you allow those farmers the hunting permits to hunt on their property, you know, control that area. Again, you'd see an empowerment thing and allow less big government. A lot of animosity was Madison telling the Northwoods what to do. When Yellowstone, and I spent a good amount of time with the park superintendent out there just before they reintroduced the wolves, their beef was as much not with the wolves coming into there, it's people from the East Coast and West Coast. People from Massachusetts and California tell us how to manage our livestock and our land in Yellowstone. You know, it's anti-government sentiment as much as it was anti-wolf that drove a lot of that fear. When they did bring back wolves to Yellowstone, they said, well, we're going to eat us out of house and home. Defenders of wildlife wisely created a $100,000 compensation fund. So they did that as a private group, saying, if you guys have a problem, you're going to get reimbursed. And I tell people, too, with wolves, even though you get reimbursed, if an animal takes my dog and somebody says that's a $500 dog and they give me a $500,
Yeah.
it helps, but you took my dog, you took my cattle, you took, you know, something of mine. So a lot of that anti-sentiment is towards the government and agencies as much as it is towards the animals sometimes.
Well, I get that the problems are with livestock. And let me put the question this way. How many incidents have you ever heard of wolves attacking and killing human beings?
One incident in Alaska, and it turned out it was a jogger in a mining camp up in the northern remote.
Because it really doesn't happen much, does it?
Less than just a couple.
Yeah, I was told never once.
Right.
Yeah,
And
I
to that
find it hard to
mining
believe.
camp, they had been feeding the local wolves hot dogs.
I know skiing in Alaska, somebody dropped off the back of the pack and wolves started circling them.
Yes.
And, you know, so they caught up quick, but it just told me, like, how could this never happen? It seems
This
like
has only happened in the last 15
Yeah.
to 20 years,
Yeah.
and there was a young female jogger that was killed by a wolf
Right.
in Alaska.
Okay.
In Newfoundland, there was a woman jogger that was killed by two of these, they call them coy dogs. They're the hybrids, the coyotes, much larger out there. They believe she was killed by two, and she was jogging and created that hunting. You know, they saw her as jogging, just like a deer jogging to flee.
And they were hungry.
Triggered that down against it. But less than half a dozen all this time.
It seems that,
I'm sorry? Yes. Yep.
it seems what you were saying earlier with your education and the education efforts has made a significant difference.
Yeah.
Teaching people what was referenced before, that if you take out a pack in one area, that every others move in, and what may have been a stable situation. And that was partly what was so terrible with the hunt that they had. It was like wide open, kill, kill, kill.
Yeah, random.
Random.
Yeah, in areas where there was no livestock, there was no pet deprivation, there were no issues. People have been looking, you know, they just wanted, that's one more thing I put in my sights.
Yes.
I got one other quick one is, there was no wolves in northern Wisconsin, you showed Minnesota, and then, but did they migrate themselves and come, or would they have some assistance from DNR and wildlife people? Were
Good
they
question.
brought in and introduced, or did they migrate naturally themselves?
There was a failed introduction in the early 70s, where they brought a half a dozen into northeast Wisconsin.
And they all perished?
They all perished.
Yeah.
So all the wolves we have were natural migrants.
Oh, they are,
from Minnesota.
okay. Yeah.
So with wolves, only the alphas will breed, typically, an alpha pair. So that means if you're a young wolf growing up and you want to breed, that's your instinct, you've got to do two things. You've got to take over that alpha position, which is not an easy thing to do, or you've got to leave and start your own territory. And they started a new territory, and as these territories kept getting bigger and bigger and spread out, they eventually started to move to Wisconsin. With no hunt, they found a perfect home, all the habitat was there. And they eventually spread not long after up to upper Michigan.
I know they were hoping for moose to do that, and the moose couldn't do it. They couldn't get around the point of Superior.
Right, there's a few moose in the UP right now, not many, a couple have wandered into Michigan.
I think
But
somewhere
once you get
around
a hard
Grand
time
Lake,
on
it's got
climate
some, I
change,
think.
because we're at the southern end already, of where they would normally habitate in northern Minnesota. So they're gonna be a victim of climate change, unfortunately, the moose are probably at the
Is there any data collected on the depredation by coyotes of chickens or other poultry farms or smaller animal?
Yeah, that's a good question.
operations?
Yeah, they did a study not long ago, and they do have data, and it turns out that I believe the numbers were around 10% overall deer population was taken by the coyotes. Don't quote me on that. But again, coyotes have about a 50% mortality rate. They lose a lot. But there are studies going on, and I think they're just wrapping up now. What that
And how about, you might speak, if you could, to other diseases of coyotes, particularly, maybe influenza. Is that something that can be?
We haven't seen it, no, I haven't heard anything about that getting in. I haven't heard CWD going into the wild canines, either wolves or coyotes, that they catch it. One thing is that they only live to be 4 to 6 years old, so is it going to kick in by the time they reach to their death, at a young age, maybe just at that time, but gestation is long enough there for that disease.
So we have trail cams out on our land, and we see, I'm just kind of curious about bobcats, because we see a lot of times, not often, but occasionally, the same night we see a coyote come down the trail, we see a bobcat on the same trail. And I was just curious how well they play together and sort of what the interaction is.
Not well. We don't see that much interaction. One from bobcat are solitary. One-on-one, I would take the bobcat over a coyote probably any time, unless it's older coyotes. But we don't have a lot of interaction reports of the bobcat.
It doesn't really affect pack behavior or pack displacement?
Not significant, no.
Okay.
But we do know in the Northwoods, bobcat are a significant predator of deer, as well as black bear. The black bear are not hunting them as much coming across them. And I think we just got time for one or two more.
I saw an image of prairie dogs. My understanding is bubonic plague is endemic in the prairie dog population.
Yes,
Can coyotes get bubonic plague or transmit it?
we're not aware of that happening. Yep, and that's one thing they do have that bubonic plague, but I'm not aware of coyotes getting that or transmitting it. All right, last question.
What will happen to the Timberwolf Alliance and the Sigurd Olson Institute if Northwood goes down?
Timberwolf Alliance, when I was, we had lost our leader just at the time the Northland had a problem in the Institute a while ago. I led us to North Lakeland Discovery Center out of Manitowoc Waters because we thought the colony was in dire straits, and they kind of said, yeah, we're not doing well, maybe, that might be good. They recovered after that. We moved back from Manitowoc Waters back to the Northland College. This just happened so that we don't know what'll happen. TWA will still exist. One of the things we do is we get other agencies together. We get the Canadian and Michigan and wildlife and Wisconsin, Minnesota people all together for symposiums. So I suspect we're going to still come along, but it hurts not having a home type of thing. That's what it does.
huge loss for that part of the state.
It's a huge loss for Ashland, yeah, because that's a good drive up there. And the
When
sand
you
is-
mentioned a 50% mortality rate, what do you mean?
That they don't make it past a year.
They, what does that mean? Who doesn't make it?
The coyotes. Yep.
A given
High
coyote.
turnover. Yep, okay. So out of 10
What's the
coyotes,
50%? I don't understand what you're saying.
half of those coyotes are not gonna survive over a
Each year,
certain period.
The ones that are born.
Right. So,
That's hard to define unless you're
yeah,
specific.
yeah, the mortality, when I talk about that, it's half of those coyotes are not gonna make it.
Half of which guy?
The new tax.
The
Babies. Each year's babies.
Any kind, yeah, let's take a baby.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
See,
yeah,
that's-
so only half of those guys are gonna make it.
Yeah,
Yeah, so we'll have a lot, which is again why they have 4 to 7 animals.
thank you.
Lastly, thanks for everybody coming out. I encourage you, there's posters here. Please take, I've got a ton of them, and there's interesting facts on the back of those. I assume somebody's got the skulls back there.
Right over here.
Okay.
Yeah, right.